So, I've made my way through the Super Nintendo library, playing through many games I've never played before, and while some of the games were underwhelming, overall this experience has reminded me of why I started this channel and this journey through gaming's history. So to celebrate before I move on to the N64 library, I'm going to do something totally original. Count down my favorite Super Nintendo games. I know, no one has ever done that on the internet before, right? Putting together my 10 favorite NES games was fairly easy, as I just had to pick the 10 games I thought sucked least. Only kidding, mostly. Picking out my favorite Super Nintendo games has been rather tricky, as there were a lot of really good games for the system, and it was hard to narrow it down to just 10. Eventually I managed it, but before I get into the list, here are a few honorable mentions. Before I begin though, let me clear up a few things. All of this is just my personal opinion, so you're more than welcome to disagree. The 10 games on my list are not there based on objective quality or importance, but rather they are simply the 10 games I personally enjoyed the most. Now, with that said, the honorable mentions. First is Super Mario All-Stars. Excellent remakes of the NES classics, but since they are remakes, I'm afraid I have to disqualify them. Harvest Moon was a charming little game, but had enough tedium in it to hold it back. It has made me interested in future entries though. F-Zero, because it's F-Zero. What else am I supposed to say? Mega Man X. In a series that had devolved into copy-paste sequels, it was nice to see something truly fresh and exciting with this game, even if it devolved right back into copy-paste sequels in the very next game. A fun title, though not as good as Mega Man 2. Illusion of Gaia and Super Mario RPG, the two games that helped to show me more examples of good JRPGs. Both had enough issues that I couldn't finish them, but I did enjoy my time with them. Demon's Crest. An interesting game to say the least. I would have liked it a lot better if the bosses weren't so frickin' hard. And finally, the Donkey Kong Country games. Both are great barrels of fun, pun intended, and they just barely missed the top 10. Now here it is, my top 10 favorite Super Nintendo games. Actraiser. I was rather critical of this game in my review, but overall I still thoroughly enjoyed it. A unique blend of a god simulator and an action platformer, Actraiser has you assuming the role of a god who's trying to purge the land of evil and help the people who live there thrive. It's a little simplistic at times, and the different sections can sometimes feel a little at odds with each other, but on the whole it's an engaging experience that I'm glad to have had. This franchise has not been doing so well in recent years, but it's good to know that the first entry still holds up fairly well, and is still a lot of fun to play. The graphics may be dated, but the music, gameplay, characters, and overall atmosphere more than make up for it. A definite classic, and it's made me curious to see what Star Fox 64 will have to offer. A collection of words that one would hope they never have to say in real life, Zombies Ate My Neighbors is a very strange game, but in a good way. You go from level to level in order to rescue your neighbors from zombies, mummies, chainsaw murderers, aliens, and giant babies. This game is definitely weird, but its unique premise is handled very well, and it's very replayable. I sadly don't have any friends to play this game in co-op mode with, but still quite fun even in solo mode. The live system is stupid, but at least there's a password system that mitigates that flaw. Aladdin. As someone who quite likes the original Disney movie this game was based on, Aladdin for the SNES is a really good time. The game is packed to the brim with clever references to the movie, the gameplay is solid, and while it's short, it's as long as it needs to be. It also has a stupid live system, but oh well, no one's perfect. I have heard some say that the Aladdin game for the Sega Genesis is better, and I'll see when I look at the Sega Genesis library, but even if that is the case, this game is still gold. Blackthorne. Prince of Persia with guns is a pretty good way of summarizing this game in a nutshell, but even that doesn't do it full justice. Sure, it has puzzles and hazards and enemies like in Prince of Persia, except instead of fighting with swords you fight with guns, but it has such a phenomenally gloomy atmosphere that makes the game feel alive in a way that few games could before the 16-bit era. You really feel like you're on a journey rather than just going through a video game. On top of that, the game manages to be hard while also still being fair, which is great. Plus, no stupid live system, which is always a plus. As I've said before, turn-based combat and me don't get along, which is the primary reason why I haven't been able to get into a lot of JRPGs. But sometimes a game can be good enough to overcome that problem for me, and the game that did it the best on the Super Nintendo was Chrono Trigger. Sure, the combat is still annoying, but it's pretty benign, and everything else about the game is fantastic. A wonderful cast of characters, a delightfully unique and well-paced story. Chrono Trigger is, in many ways, a masterpiece. I don't personally love it as much as some people do, hence why it's only number 5, but I did greatly enjoy my time with Chrono Trigger, and it helped me to be more open-minded about JRPGs, and I do appreciate it for that. Speaking of games I don't love as much as everyone else, Super Metroid. Many regard this game as one of the best, if not the best, game ever made. Me personally, I think it's okay. In all seriousness, while it may not be one of my favorite games of all time, and there are some things about it that annoy me, the sheer quality of this game is undeniable, and if you haven't played it yet, you need to, like now. And I did quite like it, as it made it to number 4 on this list. But for me, there were 3 games I enjoyed even more. Yoshis Island. I love this game. So much so that this was the first game that I gave a 10 out of 10 to. That doesn't mean it's perfect. All the 10 means is that it excels in every area, and the handful of flaws it does have ultimately do not negatively affect the overall experience to any significant degree. But while I think this game is as close to perfection as humanly possible, there are 2 games that I did like even more than this one. This game is definitely not perfect. For one, the title is really stupid, hence why I pretend that the 4 isn't there. But as an overall experience, Super Castlevania is one of the best 2D action platformers I have ever played. Some of the archaic trappings of the NES Castlevanias that this game foolishly holds onto do drag it down, but it also takes everything that made the old Castlevanias good and expands upon it, creating something truly special. I've played through it several times, and I expect I will play through it many more. Yeah, I know, predictable choice, but I can't help it. A Link to the Past is by far the best 2D Zelda game ever made, and as a Zelda fan, I absolutely adore this game. This game does so many things right, and while it may be a little rough around the edges and not quite as timeless as some other SNES games, there's a reason that it has endured over the years. It's my favorite game for the Super Nintendo, and one of my favorite games of all time. So those are my top 10 favorite Super Nintendo games. What are your favorite SNES games? Did you like my list? Whatever you thought, be sure to let me know down below in the comments. If you like what I do, feel free to subscribe and follow me on Twitter. With the SNES era behind me, next time I'll be diving into the N64 library, starting with Super Mario 64. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.